Draft grades are far from a new concept on YouTube when it comes to NFL content. There's plenty of people out there who dedicate a channel to a specific team and will talk about each individual pick in depth, or they'll talk about the draft class at whole in depth. There's plenty of people out there who cover the league at large, such as myself, that will go division by division or conference by conference or talk about the draft in one big video. But you never see anybody talk about each individual team in their own draft grades video. All 32 teams, 32 videos. You never see that happen until now. Because I was disappointed with the pre-draft content I was able to put out, because as a college student, free time is a luxury that I don't always have, I have decided to make up for it by making 32 videos throughout the month of May, talking about my thoughts on all 32 teams' drafts, and I'm really excited to get into this. Keep in mind, as per usual with draft grades videos, I know that I am going to be wrong on most of these, primarily because we haven't seen these guys play. We don't know how they're going to be developed, all of that good stuff. This is just my analysis based upon how I graded different players leading into the draft. You know, if I think a guy was overdrafted based on my evaluations, underdrafted, etc., that's what these grades are based off of. I also don't think I'm better than any NFL GM out there. I'm just a 21-year-old college kid who spends the little free time he has watching film. So bear with me. People seem to like my opinions on this kind of stuff. I like sharing it, so I'm going to continue to do so. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the Green Bay Packers and what they did during the 2024 NFL Draft. This Packers draft class has been a weird one for me because I have bounced back and forth with a lot of the grades that you see before you and the actual overall grade that you'll see towards the end of the video. Just because there's so many picks here that, like, in the moment, I was like, ugh, that's tough. Like Tyron Hopper, for example, taking him at pick 91, and we'll talk more about that. But I despised that pick in the moment. And then as time went on and I thought about it a little more, I'm like, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. Still not great, but definitely not as bad as I thought. Or the Marshon Lloyd pick. In the moment, I was like, oh, that's the running back you're going with? But then I'm like, okay, I see the vision. He's a good complement to the other two backs they have on the roster. And some other guys like Javon Bullard, I like him as a player, but I was questioning his fit in Green Bay because I had completely forgotten that they brought in Xavier McKinney, and now his role makes a lot more sense. So I don't know if it's just like my mind playing tricks on me to subconsciously want me to grade the Packers lower, but I think, you know, where I stand now with my final grades for all of the picks and their overall grade, I think I stand in a pretty positive spot with what Green Bay did. Was it my favorite draft? No. Was it the best draft? No. But I think they did a very solid job, despite whiffing on a couple picks towards the middle, and we'll get to them. But the first pick they made, taking Jordan Morgan out of Arizona, this is a very Packers pick. And the reason I say that is because you're drafting an offensive tackle with guard flexibility, and you know the Green Bay Packers love their ability to move their linemen around, to plug guys in when guys get hurt or what have you. Think Elgton Jenkins, for example, who can play literally any position on the offensive line. There's a reason why they love him so much and they pay him so much money, on top of just being really good at playing on the offensive line. But Morgan is a tough one for me because while he fits what Green Bay likes and he was the best lineman on the board at the time, I think this is a little early for him. I had a early second round grade on him, and there were some guys on the board that I think just fit what Green Bay needed a little bit better. A guy like Cooper DeJean, who, you know, they ended up making up for that later in the draft, but pairing him with Xavier McKinney or just having him in your secondary in any regard, I think he might have been more of a nickel corner in Green Bay, which is what he is ideally, but he would have fit there. There were a couple of other corners on the board that could have fit what they needed. Kool-Aid McKinstry seemed like a very Packers corner. You have a couple other guys on the offensive side of the ball, like a Graham Barton or a Jackson Powers Johnson. Both would have been great fits in Green Bay. And I know JPJ and Kool-Aid both fell to the second round. I don't care. I had them graded as first round talent. So to me, from my evaluations, them being on the board and taking a guy like Morgan is less than ideal. Now, I do think Jordan Morgan's a good offensive lineman. I think he's going to be a great plug-and-play tackle for them. And if he doesn't work at tackle, like I said, you can, you know, say 2 years down the line, he's a mediocre tackle. You fail him at tackle, and then you can kick him inside to guard. He'll probably be a good guard if all else fails. So I think that's a pretty safe pick. Now, there's an argument to be made that maybe it's a little too safe. Maybe they could have taken a bigger swing here. But I think Morgan's a fine tackle. Very technically sound. Showed off some really good hand usage against guys like Laiatu Latu. There's a lot to like about him. He's a good athlete, can get to the second level, really sound pass blocker. My big complaints with him obviously are his length, which is kind of a universal thing, and I feel like he's a very passive run blocker. And for me, at least, when I have an offensive lineman, I want them to kill the guy across from them on every rep, or at least try to, when it comes to run blocking. And Morgan just isn't that type of guy. There's going to be a lot of instances where he's going to let guys get their hands on him first. He's going to kind of play the defensive, and that will result in guys getting their hands in his chest, which is tough because he's not great against bull rushes. It'll result in him placing his hands a little bit wide because he has to get around them, things like that. So it's going to create some other problems other than just not having the ideal mindset for what I personally want out of an offensive tackle. But I don't think he's a bad pick by any means. I don't think he's a bad tackle by any means. I don't see a world where he's a total bust and the Packers threw away a first-round pick. I think at worst you get like a solid starting guard out of Morgan, and that's okay. You know, at the end of the day, in the late first round, you just want a guy that's going to start somewhere. And if it's a guard, then so be it. If that ends up being where Morgan ends up, I don't think that'll be the case. I think he'll be a tackle for them for a while. Because when you look at guys like Rasheed Walker, who was a 7th round pick, and Andre Dillard, and God knows what else they have on the offensive line. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody there. Royce Newman, maybe. I don't know if he's played tackle for them. I feel like he has. But either way, the point is, they needed a tackle. They took Morgan. I get the pick. I like it enough. Not my favorite pick, but definitely one that makes sense for them. And then you get into the second round, and they trade up to grab Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker out of Texas A&M. And this is another pick I like. I like this one more than the Morgan pick, just because Cooper was my LB3, had a mid-second round grade on him. This is about where they took him. And I think Cooper is a very, very solid linebacker. I think pairing him with Quay Walker is a great idea. Cooper can be like your true Mike, ideally long-term. I think there's some development to get there. Specifically as a run defender, his diagnostics and his eye discipline definitely needs to improve, but there's a good foundation there. He's got the spunk, he's got the mentality, the energy that you want out of a linebacker. He loves to hit people. He's somebody that, you know, and this is going to become even more apparent when we talk about Tyron Hopper, but he's somebody that a lot of times he just wants to hit somebody, and that can be good, that can be bad. You kind of want to train him to be like, hey man, train him. Now I'm talking about him like he's a dog. You kind of want to get his head right and make sure he's like, hey man, you know, I get you want to hit people, just make sure it's the guy with the ball, right? And Cooper is definitely a lot further along in that process than Hopper is, but you know, that's definitely still something you have to work with. He's a lot better in coverage too than Hopper, and I think he's a lot better in coverage than Quay Walker as well. So like I said, ideally long-term, Edgerrin Cooper can step in and be your Mike and be your true do-it-all linebacker. He's got really good blitzing chops. He's great at coming off the edge. He can, you know, he has a little bit of bend to him, things like that. Really good length, really good play strength. He's a fun, good all-around linebacker. The only reason this isn't like an A+ is because I do think there was a better linebacker on the board. In fact, I think he went before Junior Colson as well. So that would be 2 better linebackers on the board. I had Jeremiah Trotter behind, I had Cooper behind Jeremiah Trotter and Junior Colson. Those were my top 2 linebackers. So that's the only reason this isn't like an A+ home run pick. Still a damn good pick. I think Cooper is absolutely worth taking here. So can't complain there whatsoever. And then also in the second round, they walk away with Javon Bullard, the safety out of Georgia. And this is one of those picks where initially I didn't like it as much as I like it now. And not because I dislike Bullard, the player. He's my safety too. I think he's a very good safety. But again, for some reason, I forgot that Xavier McKinney was a Green Bay Packer. I don't know if it's just because I was so hyped up on the Bears offseason that I forgot, oh, other teams also were allowed to make moves in free agency or what it was. But I didn't like this pick at first because I was like, okay, they're trying to make Bullard their free safety, for lack of a better word. I know not a lot of teams run the like traditional free and strong safety anymore, but the idea of like having one guy that's more of a coverage guy and one guy that's more of a run support guy is still definitely a thing. And In my eyes, Bullard I thought was going to be that coverage guy. And that's fine. He has the skill set to do it. He's just not the ideal athlete for that. He's much better athletically coming downhill, playing in the short to intermediate area than he is playing over the top as like, a true cover one safety or even a cover two safety. But remembering McKinney's there, it's like, oh, okay, Bullard is their true strong safety there. He's going to come downhill, play the run, bounce around a little bit, play different spots. I like that a lot more. Now, the reason this is an A- and not a true A is simply because I had Malik Mustafa ahead of him on my big board. So I would have preferred them to take Mustafa because he can also do that and also do a lot more. I think he would have been a better fit for a more versatile, do it all type of player, and even somebody that, if all else fails, he can be the single high coverage guy and allow you to bring McKinney into the box more. So I think Mustafa would have been a better fit, but Bullard's a great player in his own right. He's a really, really good downhill player. Like I said, he's got great route anticipation. He's able to fly down and make plays on, different short to intermediate routes pretty well. Really good instincts. He has good experience at a bunch of different positions, was a killer nickel his sophomore year, and then bounced out to being a more traditional split safety during his final year at Georgia. He had good ball production, especially relative to the role he was playing. He's a strong tackler. It's just like I said, he's not the fastest guy in the world. His pursuit angles aren't exactly fantastic. There could definitely be some work done there, which he's a lot better in pursuit when he's closer to the box or closer to the line of scrimmage than when he is downfield. And I think in Green Bay, that's going to be a lot more of his role. And his hip flexibility isn't great. But otherwise, I think Bullard's a great player. I think he's somebody that Green Bay fans are going to love. I think he fits what their defense needed for sure, especially again after remembering that Xavier McKinney's there. So I think that's a really good pick. I like the fit a lot. I think him and McKinney are going to make one hell of a duo. And then in the third round, the first pick they make here is Marshon Lloyd, the running back out of USC. And I want to hate this pick a lot more than I do, just because I don't like Lloyd very much as a player. But I did have a late round 3, early round 4 grade on him. And this is, on the cusp of that. I would say this is about late round 3. Maybe closer to mid round 3. It's semantics at that point. But the point is, this is about where I would have taken him, if not a little bit early, but not too early for me to get upset about. But the reason he's lower is just because I thought there were better backs on the board, even for what they wanted. Because Lloyd is obviously not going to be their lead back. He's not going to be the headliner in their backfield by any means because they have Josh Jacobs. They just wanted somebody who gives you something different than Jacobs and A.J. Dillon, because those two guys, their skill sets are very redundant. So you bring in Lloyd as more of your speedy, pass-catching, just athletic back. And for somebody in this position, I would have preferred them to have taken Will Shipley, Bucky Irving, Dylan Laube out of New Hampshire. Like, there were a couple backs that I think just fit that role a little bit better than Lloyd. So that's the reasoning for the B. And also the fact that, like I said, maybe this is a little early for him. But as a player, you're getting a guy who is very DeAndre Swift-esque to give a comp. I think his vision is a little bit worse than Swift's, which is saying a lot, because that is like the big issue with DeAndre Swift is his ability to see the field. But they both have a killer jump cut that they can really make a career out of. That's why DeAndre Swift was the first running back off the market in free agency this year. He's an explosive player with receiving upside and has a killer jump cut that allows him to, get into open space quickly and then accelerate and take off. Marshon Lloyd can do a little bit of the same. It's just, like I said, I think he has worse vision. I was going to say he's less vision inclined. That wouldn't have made sense. He has worse vision, which is concerning. But if Green Bay's offensive line can hold up and they're basically just saying, hey, Marshon, we want you catching the ball out of the backfield and bouncing runs to the outside, but we don't want to run Josh or AJ between the tackles, then I get it. Then that can absolutely work. There's a role for him in their backfield. So I don't hate the pick by any means. I'm just not a huge fan of the player, and I think there were better options on the board for a guy that can fill that role. But then we get to their other third-round pick, and Tyron Hopper, the linebacker out of Missouri. And this is where I start to have some big problems with this draft class. And the Hopper pick, it grew on me, because initially I was like, oh my god, this is horrific. This is a terrible pick. And I still don't think it's good. I think there were a lot of linebackers that are better than Hopper in this position. But I kind of get it. Like, Hopper would be your strong side backer and probably like a special teams guy mostly, which is a little bit concerning, because if we're taking special teamers in the 3rd round, what are we doing? The only reason I don't have this as like an F, like their 4th round pick, Evan Williams, who we'll talk about in a moment, is because they didn't have to trade for him. They didn't have to trade up or anything like that. They didn't give up anything extra to get him. And I can kind of see the vision. But like I said, when there's guys like Jeremiah Trotter still on the board, he was what, the 91st pick. Trotter was still on the board. I want to say, who else was there? Peyton Wilson was still on the board. He was 398. Tommy Eichenberg was still on the board. Cedric Gray was still on the board. Michael Barrett, James Williams, Jalen Ford. These are all guys that I had graded higher than Hopper. It's really tough. It's really tough for me to get it. But Hopper is just like a straight up downhill run defender. He's going to crack somebody's head open if he gets a clean shot at him. And that's a very Packers player. And again, he'll probably be really good on special teams to start out his career. And if you get into an obvious rushing or an obvious run defense situation, then he's got a role, but you got to give him a clean lane. He's not great at shedding blocks. He's not great at reading gaps. His gap discipline isn't fantastic. He's just a shoot a gap and kill somebody type of guy. So it's tough. Hopper is someone that I'm giving a little bit of benefit of the doubt to, because I did really like him at Missouri. This is kind of the opposite of the Marshon Lloyd treatment, where I want to grade him a lot higher. But realistically, it's just not a good pick. I think there were 5 other routes they could have went that would have been better here. And, that's just linebackers. They could have went with a corner. There were still good corners on the board. This is a really deep receiver class. I know their receiver room's good, but you can never have too many good receivers, especially when you have guys like Christian Watson who just can't stay healthy. And then one of their receivers is coming off a big injury. I think it's Dontavian Wicks, but I could be wrong. So there were just a bunch of different directions they could have went. They could have went interior offensive line. There were still some good guys there. It's just tough. I'm almost talking myself into grading this Hopper pick a little bit lower, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it at a C- here. But then we get to the 4th round, and they take Evan Williams, the safety out of Oregon. And first of all, this one just feels redundant. You just took Javon Bullard. You already have Xavier McKinney. And you end up taking a safety again in the 5th round. And Evan Williams doesn't do anything that these guys don't already do. And he doesn't do anything better. Like, he's a really slow, downhill safety that almost plays more like a linebacker, but he's built like a coverage safety. Little ball production, that's a bit of a concern. He's not rangy. He's like a gadget safety almost. He's going to be a really good blitzer. And he's strong, he's willing, he's got the mentality you want out of a downhill safety, but he doesn't have the build, he doesn't have the quickness. He's just, I don't know what Evan Williams is at the next level, to tell you the truth. Probably a special teamer. And taking a special teamer in the 4th round, and not only taking a special teamer in the 4th round, but trading up. They gave up extra assets to go up and get Evan Williams. I don't get it. I really don't. I graded 10 safeties this year. Evan Williams was not one of them, so I had to go back and watch him after the draft. And I can say with full confidence, I don't know if I would have had a draftable grade on this guy. I really don't. I think he would have been someone maybe take a flyer on in the 7th just to say, hey, we need special teams depth. I could see that. But trading up for him in the 4th round is just inexcusable. This is a horrific whiff by Brian Gutekunst and co. So I don't want to spend too much more time on it, because I don't like being super negative in these videos, but goodness gracious, I don't get it. And then in the 5th round, they trade up again to go out and get Jacob Monk, the interior offensive lineman out of Duke. And he's another guy I had to come back and watch. And I mean, I get it. He's got the size, he's got the athleticism. There were some linemen that I definitely thought were better at this point on the board. This is another situation where maybe you could have went a different route, went with a corner, went with a receiver. I just feel like this was very much like, listen, we wanted Graham Barton in the first. We ended up going Jordan Morgan. We saw this guy when we were watching Barton. Let's not put our Barton film review to waste and make sure we get something out of it. And I don't think Monk will be bad by any means. I think he's a good developmental backup offensive lineman that, you know, maybe he can turn into something. Maybe he's just a good backup for the entirety of his career, but it's fine. I don't have any real problems with it. I don't think it's a great pick. I don't think it's a bad pick. It's very much like middle of the pack, a C, nothing too special. Probably would have been a little bit higher if they didn't trade up for him, but trading up for him, I do have to knock them a little bit. And then just a few picks later, they take the safety Katan Oladipo out of Oregon State. And I really like this pick for them. I think Oladipo is a very, very good third safety. I think he can do a lot of stuff that maybe you're not going to have Bullard or Xavier McKinney do. Or, you know, if you want to try Bullard in the nickel a little bit, you can bring Oladipo out and he can do what Bullard's going to do for you. Not quite at the same level, but there's going to be things that he does better. I think he's a bit better of a downhill player. I think he hits harder. He's got the size, he's got the strength, he's got the length. Good ball production, excuse me. Very good playmaker. He has the length to kind of get an arm in a passing window. He's got a wide tackle radius thanks to that length. He's got that good size, like I said, good strength, decent enough athlete, solid anticipation. He's really good at handling tight ends, or at least should be on paper at the next level. He did a pretty good job of it in college, but like at the next level, I think he'll be a lot better just because they're going to probably ask him to do that a lot more. He's like a matchup nightmare because of that size, that length, and the fact that he plays really, really tough at the catch point. Now, he's not somebody you're ever going to ask to guard a slot receiver. He's not a super rangy guy, but, you know, just for that third safety role, taking a flyer on him in the 5th round, I think is a good pick. The only reason this isn't like an A is because this is the third safety they're drafting. I genuinely mean it. If you just get rid of Evan Williams, even if they just forfeited that 4th round pick and took Oladipo here, then I would be much, much higher on this draft. I just feel like taking Evan Williams is throwing away a 4th round pick, and that's not a great thing to do. But, you know, it is what it is. I think Oladipo will definitely serve a good role for them, both as an immediate impact defender, and I think he'll be a pretty good special teamer if they ask him to play there a little bit, which once you get into the 5th round, taking guys who not are full-time special teamers, but are going to play snaps on special teams is a lot more understandable. So I definitely like this pick 10 times more, if not a billion times more than I like the Evan Williams pick. All right, so a little bit of a confession. This isn't the first time I've uploaded this video. If you've seen it already, then you already know where this is going. But basically, when I first uploaded this video, the first version of this video, I had read the wrong scouting report for Travis Glover. And for some reason, I believe I got him mixed up with a defensive lineman that the Vikings drafted or something like that. But basically, I was reading off of somebody else's notes because I admittedly didn't scout Glover, and I was going off of, you know, the process and the traits and things of that nature, and being like, this is a good developmental defensive lineman. Travis Glover's an offensive tackle. So I had read off the wrong player. Like I said, I apologize for that. But my thoughts on this are pretty simple. It's a solid pickup. He's a good developmental offensive lineman with good traits, good build. Taking a flyer on an offensive lineman at the end of the 6th round makes a ton of sense. I don't know a whole lot about Travis as a player, but I'm sure he's going to be a fine developmental option. And again, I apologize to anyone out there who saw the original version of this video. I can assure you, I know who Travis Glover is now. I know he's not a defensive lineman. Just a simple mistake on my part, but that being said, shout out to Travis Glover. And then in the 7th round, they get a straight up steal in Michael Pratt, the quarterback out of Tulane. I had a 4th round grade on him. You get him in the 7th. I think Pratt is somebody that just screams career good backup. And I like Gutenkust's idea to move on quickly from Sean Clifford, who just wasn't good. I kind of liked Clifford coming out, but he wasn't, you know, it became very apparent from the way Packers fans were talking and the way people, you know, kind of in the know were talking around Green Bay that Sean Clifford wasn't anything. So landing Michael Pratt, who I thought, like I said, was worth a 4th round pick, and who knows, maybe he has the intelligence and kind of some of the basic intangibles to be like Andy Dalton, Case Keenum level starter. So maybe one day the Packers will be in a situation where somebody's desperate for a quarterback and they can ship him off for higher draft value or something like that. But at the very least, you're getting a guy that I think is going to be a really good backup to Jordan Love. So I like that pick a lot. I think getting Pratt in the 7th round is definitely a steal, definitely their best value pick in this draft, in my opinion. Maybe not their best overall pick. I would say Edgerrin Cooper probably fits that bill, but I like the pick a lot for them. And then in the 7th round, also their final pick, 10 picks later, they take Kalen King, the corner out of Penn State. And I didn't watch King. I didn't go back and watch King. I just don't have the time to check up on every 7th round pick. I do remember him flashing a little bit when I was watching Joey Porter Jr. last year, but from the little information I was able to gather, he went from a lot of people picking up on those flashes when watching Joey Porter to being a pretty bad corner this year. And I forget which bowl game he participated in because he's coming out as a true junior. So I guess it would have been the Shrine Bowl. He apparently didn't have too great of a performance there. So it is what it is. I'm just not going to grade this pick because, like I said, I don't know enough about him to give a full opinion. It's a 7th round pick. I can't say anything negative about it because at the end of the day, pick 255, you're just looking for a guy that might maybe somehow make the roster. And if he doesn't, then you don't lose sleep over it. So we'll have to see how that pans out. But as a whole, I think Green Bay definitely did a pretty good job. This final grade is one that I've kind of flipped back and forth with. And I genuinely think if you get rid of the Evan Williams pick, you just get rid of it. I'm not even saying draft somebody else in the 4th round. I'm not saying trade away your 4th round pick. Just eliminate it, forfeit it. This would be an easy A. But because you take Evan Williams in the 4th, that drags down the Katan Oladipo pick. It makes me look at this team as one that not only wasted a 4th round pick, but traded up to waste a 4th round pick. So I'm going to have to dock them for that. I wanted to give them an A-, but I'm going to settle on a B+. It's just throwing away a 4th round pick like that is really unacceptable. You know, when you're in the 4th round, you're still looking for roster spots. You're still looking for guys that are going to be contributors either day one or developmental long term. And Evan Williams doesn't fit either of those spots because even as a special teamer, Oladipo's better. That's the other thing. If they took Oladipo or they didn't take Oladipo, maybe I could stomach the Williams pick a little bit better. But you take a guy who plays very similar to him and does everything he does better the next round. What is that? 58 picks later. I don't get it. I really can't wrap my head around Evan Williams, so I got to give him a B+. I think a B+ is still a very respectable draft. They did a great job on their first 3 picks. The Lloyd pick, I'm sure other people are much higher on him than I am, and that's fine. I understand. He's a fun, exciting player. He definitely fits what they want in their backfield, so I can't say that's a bad pick by any means. Hopper, I want to be wrong about. We'll have to see. And then Monk, whatever. Oladipo, good pick. Travis Glover, good pick. Michael Pratt's a true steal. And Kalen King, I've seen some people already start to compare him to Kevin King, who we all know cost the Packers a playoff game. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. I don't know. I don't have any frame of reference for that, but I do like what the Packers did quite a bit. So hats off to Brian Gutekunst. He had a good draft. Not the best draft in the world, but certainly one that is going to help both day one and gives you some pieces for the future.
Had a chance on the throwback. This was an ill-advised throw. What an unbelievable catch by Cole Kmet. And he cups it too. No movement when he hits the ground, tucked up against his shoulder. Wow.
Using that